There's a couple of buttons I have to press in the background, so just waiting for them to show up. Okay, here we go. We are now live. So usually a notification comes up on LinkedIn to say that we're live, so I'm just checking for that. Yep.
It's official.
Yep. We're in business. Welcome all. If you could drop in the chat where you are joining from, that would be amazing. We're we're not quite at time yet, and I usually do start about a couple of minutes after the hour, just for those who are moving between meetings. So if you need to grab a drink, if you need a comfort break, feel free to do that. You will not be missing anything for the next couple of minutes. It's in the morning where you are, Brad, isn't it? What time is it?
Yeah, it's 7:58 a.m. right now.
Yeah, that's early. Yeah, it's just before 1 p.m. here.
Yeah. Yeah, you're having lunch. I just had breakfast, so
I appreciate the early start. Thank you.
yeah. I'm a morning person. By about 3 p.m. here, I run out of energy and steam. So you get the best of me in the morning. So
Have you always been a morning person?
I have my entire life. It's ironic because, as a teenager, most teenagers like to sleep in and they get up late and do their thing, right? I was always up early. And unfortunately, then, I would get, just a few hours of sleep because I'd stay up late too. But in my old age now, I go to bed really early and I'm up really early. So I have always been like this. And it's almost impossible for me to sleep past like 7 a.m.
No. Oh,
Occasionally I do it.
oh, no, I've only become a morning person after becoming a mum. Otherwise, before stay up. I can stay up quite late, but I've never been an all-nighter, and I'm a crier as well. So if I don't have sleep, even in this my current age, I will cry if I don't sleep. And
That's
I
good to know.
some people might, say, "Are we sure you're an actual adult?" But yeah, I cry very real tears. I need snacks. I need all of that. So, but become a mum. I hate chaos, so I wake up very early to get my sons ready and to have a slower morning as opposed to dashing everywhere. But definitely not. It's not in my DNA. I've had to train myself to get up early, so I'm usually up at about 6 a.m. now.
Wow. Yeah. That's early.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a 5:30 is my typical time I'm up. I'm usually up by 5:30 and have a morning routine. I'm a creature of habit. I do the same thing, pretty much eat the same breakfast almost every morning.
For how many
And
years?
uh probably 15 I've been married 20, so at least 15 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I envy you. I feel like if I had a bit more structure in my life, I feel like I could do so much more. But I'm also the type who likes novelty,
Mm.
It's been a mum that has made me a bit more structured in my approach. But otherwise, if I could wake up every single day and be like, what do I feel like to? Yeah, that would be me. Like
Yeah.
quite chaotic. And which is why it's so interesting, because when it comes to work, I'm very structured. I'm very much like, this is the list, this is the plan, this is what we have to do. But my brain doesn't naturally work like that at all. It's like
Yeah.
this, that's how my thoughts are.
Well, I live with a version of you because that's my wife. We are complete polar opposites.
Yeah,
She every day is different for her.
yeah,
Every day is pretty much the same for me, which is the way I like it. So, and she loves exploration and new things every day. And she doesn't. She's not a breakfast person. She doesn't eat breakfast, but it drives her nuts that I eat almost the same thing every day.
yeah.
It drives her wild.
Yeah, 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 I think I'd get along with her then, because I don't understand. It makes no sense to me. I get it. I personally couldn't do it, but I get how it's great for life. What do they say? Is it Steve Jobs who used to wear the same thing, and
Yep.
removing decision fatigue and all the decisions that you have to make so you can focus on where your energy should actually go. Yeah, I know it. It's one of those things that I know, but in terms of application, we're struggling there. My own kind of change management defects.
Well, I would love to believe that I'm a wicked genius like Steve Jobs, and that's my rationale for it. But it's my preference of the way I like to do it, and that it's not it has nothing to do with decision fatigue or anything. But I would love to believe I was that brilliant that that was also my reasoning. I'm just
Yeah,
that much of a genius that I can only make so many decisions a day, so I don't want to think about the food I eat or the shirt I put on. But none of that is true, and as you'll find out in the next 35 minutes, I'm not a genius. So
no, no, I don't agree with that. I definitely think there is some genius here, because the minute I saw the title of your book, I knew that you were onto something, and something, a conversation that we all have to have. So that being said, let's get started. It's a couple of minutes past the hour. So, welcome all to the third episode of How Business Change Really Happens. And I'm so proud to have Brad Clark here with us, former CEO, current managing partner at Navigate, and author of Change Without Management. Today, we're going to be talking a bit more about change without management, about Brad's journey, and really having that conversation again around how business change really happens, aside from frameworks, looking more at influence, power dynamics, who we are as people, and what we bring to the systems that we occupy. So, thank you so much for joining us, Brad.
thank you, Nissi. And when Nissi asks you to do something, you do it. And she reached out to me through DMs about a month ago and said, "I'd love to do a LinkedIn Live," and I'd say I'd loved it more. So this is fun. This is exciting. My first LinkedIn Live, and very excited. I'm going to run people through some slides, but very excited for the conversation and the dialogue. It is why I wrote the book, and you won't agree with everything in the book, which is almost by design. So that's the beauty of it. So the idea and what we're hoping for today is have some really great dialogue around our field of practice that we all love.
Amazing. So before we jump into the book and before we jump into the slides, please give us a bit of an introduction. Who are you? And what's brought you to this moment now, other than the DMs?
Yeah, so Nisi did a good job describing the roles I've played. I've been everything from a CEO of a behavioral health hospital to a consultant to now running a small boutique consulting firm. I've worked in Fortune 100 companies, both as an employee and as an independent contractor when I was out on my own, and now as a consultant to a lot of large enterprises. So I primarily have played in large enterprise, not a ton of experience in small, medium-sized businesses, but my experience is more Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies. So I also get the joy and the absolute pleasure of teaching at the University of Cincinnati for their graduate psychology program. And it's essentially IO Psych students, graduate IO Psych students. So it's fun to see 23, 24-year olds think about things and question things in a way that I don't get in my normal day to day. When I'm sitting with an executive team, they often don't ask like the tough why questions. They just assume things, and I get in class and they ask, "Well, why do you do it that way?" And that was a part of the rationale behind this book is, um, I've been teaching them, you give them basic change frameworks and, everything from Lewin to Cotter's work to ProSci and, push them to get ProSci certified so they have something on the resume. And, I vividly remember it was about 8 years ago, a student asked me, "Well, Brad, how often do you actually use these frameworks?" And,
Yeah.
and I had to be honest. And I said, "Well, I mean, they're essentially in the back of my head, but do I use them, day to day and probably in the way that they are intended to be used? No." And he said, "Well, what do you do?" And so then I had to go on this journey of, okay, I probably need to document what I do because I was just riffing off the cuff and, giving them things like ecosystem mapping and trying to explain that to them. And so, 7, 8 years ago, that seed was planted that I owe it to the next generation of practitioners to, I've been doing this for 25 years to give back to them the things that were given to me. Everything in here is essentially taken from somebody else, right? I learned this from somebody. This is very few things in the book and the tools are new to me that I came up with. A lot of this is working with other practitioners and us coming up with there's a better way to do this. Let's think about the better way. And so this was either a collaboration or I just flat out stole it from somebody that was wicked smart and smarter than me.
Well, they say the best form of flattery is stealing things. And do you know what? Nothing's new under the sun. We're all evolving versions of thinking. And I think that's what's really, really great. Another thing, just before we jump into the slides, are there any observations that you've made? Because you have this really unique perspective of having bought change management services, of being an academic, and of being a practitioner. There's this triad in my head, there's this kind of Venn diagram, and it's
Mhm.
rare to see all of them converge in one person as they do with you. So, congratulations. But any observations that you have from having that experience?
Yeah, the big one is at the center of the book, and it's the I got asked a question on a podcast a couple weeks ago. What's the one thing we could take in to the office on Monday? What's the one idea, the one concept you'd want to seed with us? Which was a wonderful question, and I thought about it for a second, and I said, move everything to the edges where the intelligence lives. And as a CEO, right, you center everything around the leadership team and everything happens through them. And we'd have meetings and we'd go out and tell people go cascade this to the middle managers and then have them cascade down, right? And that was never effective. And I watched this, I played that role for almost 9 years. And I watched this constantly fail. And then I got into organizations as a consultant and I'm seeing the same dynamic of
Yeah,
it's never actually living where people are actually having to make the change, which is at the edge of the organization. Very rarely, we do big system implement. This leaders very rarely use the systems, right? They're never in them. Or they have an admin that does it, or they're very
yeah,
rarely, heavily impacted by this. And me as a CEO in my former seat, I very rarely ever felt the impacts of the. We made pretty transformative changes. It was at a time in healthcare where payments were getting disrupted. The industry was almost in whole getting disrupted, and the way we were delivering services and patient-centered care was coming in, and electronic records was coming in. It was a massive upheaval of change and transformation. I very rarely felt the impact. Like I didn't have to do things different in my day to day because of those things. The people
yeah.
that did were least involved in the decisions. They were
Mm,
least involved in the process and the journey to get there. And so if at the center of this book sits human-centered design, and if we push everything to the edges, it it just works, right? It's the one thing that I see and consistent in, I'm speaking from one man's perspective. In my
mm,
25 years, when we were able to bring people into the journey and they were not just, a a passive participant, but they
yeah,
were an active rider in the front seat. Change worked, and when we didn't, it failed massively. And so, if we could do one thing, and one thing I think I noticed from all of those seats is when we push decisions, when we push the work to the edges where the intelligence actually lives, and we get that back to the center, things just tend to work better. So that's my rocket science for the day.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. And if you leave me, there's so many more questions I could ask after, but please, if you share your presentation with us, let's dive into that. And for those on the call, if as we're going through, if you've got any questions, please do drop them in the chat. Because we'll field those, and it's really great to see the insights that everybody else is getting, not just my own. So please feel free to drop any thoughts in the chat. That would be great.
Okay. Hopefully you are seeing it here.
Yep, your screen is shared. Just waiting for the slides.
Can you see them yet, Nissi?
No, not yet. It's the Riverside screen. At the moment, you're in the screening screen.
We, believe it or not, we practiced this and it worked.
It works perfectly in the practice.
Yeah, you see, it's not letting me share my entire screen now. It's only letting me share a window or the tab.
How bizarre.
Let me try this. Does that
Yes,
work?
I think it's working now. Yes, that's worked.
And technology. It's beautiful when it works.
Exactly.
Okay. I know I looked at the participant list. I know many of you are practitioners, and so I do have to own something right out of the gate on this, and that's that this is kind of the book is I say it's either a tomatoes or a flowers kind of thing, right? You either get tomatoes thrown at you or people throw flowers at your feet. And there's not a lot of gray area here, right? A lot of the things that I talk about in this book, it challenges the way we have done things, the orthodoxies that businesses have lived with around this practice for 30 plus years. And so it is intended to challenge that. And so this will be a tomatoes or a flowers thing. So with that said, if you've read the book or you're going to read the book, it starts with a story, and it's a story of a that I tell about a random Tuesday morning that wasn't so random. In the middle of nowhere, Ohio, I was working with a global manufacturing company, and we had just finished up discovery work. This was probably almost 3 months of discovery, over 200 people we spoke with. And we had a beautiful deck. It's one of those decks, a lot of you are practitioners or consultants on the live right now, and it's one of those decks you were proud of as a practitioner and somebody that does this for a living. It's a deck you spent a lot of time on, and so I had it all ready. I was ready to go, presenting to the executive leadership team. I get I get a couple handfuls of slides into the deck, and the CEO, whose name is Mag, who's actually gonna we're working on he and I doing a podcast together, which will be really fun. Um, he asked me this question. He said, "Brad, this is great. What you're presenting is exactly what we asked for. But what happens when everything in this plan becomes irrelevant 3 months from now?" And then he went on to share, you know, our biggest customer we know is trying to build a bigger, better thing that we are building. We know that for certain. What happens when this? We know the steel market's going crazy right now, and that's going to impact this. He just went through 5 or 6 different what happens then kind of scenarios. And of course, like a consultant, you don't like to not have the answer, but I didn't have a good answer. I said something about agile transformation. I used a couple other kind of buzzwords, but really I didn't give him a good answer. He kind of called my bluff that day. Um, what I had was a beautiful deck that was fundamentally dishonest, and it was based on, um, they had a problem. I'm selling certainty to them, right? As a consultant, and as a change consultant, okay, that's transformation's broken. That's why you called me. Um, I have a plan. I have an approach that will fix it. I have a methodology. I have all the certifications. I have all the frameworks. They were all in this beautiful deck, and none of them was going to actually get them transformation. And so I left that that Tuesday after a long day there. And this is what popped in my head on my drive home. We are selling certainty in an uncertain world. Um, we don't sell transformation, we sell reassurance largely, right? We sell playbooks. So the CEO has a story for the board, or we sell, a framework so, the CEO can put a number in the budget, or HR can roll out a process. They give everybody in the room a feeling of being in control, and control in this world is an illusion. I only have 15 minutes to walk through 255 pages. We would get into what I call the perfect storm, which is I think what we're in right now, where we have all of these economic, geopolitical influences that are coming in and disrupting the way we are doing business. I can't get into all that, but I promise you, if you pick the book up, you'll read my point of view around that. So when I left there Tuesday, this is what I was left with, and this is essentially the answer that popped up the next morning. What if the playbook itself is the problem? What if the thing that I had been spending at this point probably 20 plus years learning was the problem, and which is not a great feeling for a practitioner, right? So I spent 20 some years building up this knowledge base, and what if everything I learned was broken? And then what if I had to spend the next 2 years unlearning everything I thought I knew? And so, like all good practitioners, of course, I said, well, I don't want to do that. So let me do the diagnosis first and understand this. So this is part two of the book. Um, and this is an important part. I can't walk you through every diagnosis. The book definitely does that, but I'm going to give you some of the big ones here. And this is when I said, when I looked at the playbooks, the frameworks, the accreditations, the certifications, the trainings, everything that we all, and probably most all of you on the line today have been through. When I looked at them, I found a lot of common things that I think were built for a time that just no longer exists. You could argue, and it'd be a good argument, I think, that they probably that time never really existed because most of these were built between 25 and 35 years ago. And so I'm not sure that time was even then, but it's definitely not now. So this is the slide where um, you get a lot of great LinkedIn conversation and comments and DMs on. But here's my 5 assumptions that kind of broke everything for me, and this is based on all the frameworks that I researched. I found these 5 things in common with all of them. The first thing is that change is kind of linear, right? Everyone has 7 steps, 5 steps, 8 steps, whatever it is. Phase one, phase two, phase three. And in reality, our orgs are just nonlinear systems, right? Small changes compound over time. I was at a conference a little about 2 weeks ago now, and somebody put up a beautiful slide, and it was a real slide of their current state of transformation in their organization, and there was probably 25 ongoing initiatives, 5 of which were the top 5 priorities in the organization. And so these things are compounding. Nothing's linear, um, and they're living in circles now, and so it is not linear. Um, this is something we talked about at the start of the live, but control generally comes from the center, right? Most of these models are built for leaders are kind of the linchpin to it. The CEO decides, the VPs cascade, managers reinforce, and the workforce kind of complies, right? That's the general heartbeat of a lot of the models. And in our model, what we're saying is it's the edges, not the center, right? That when we push things to the edges, we just get more success. The third one is that people are predictable, right? There's predictability in this, and we know that that's just not true. We're all shaped by context, by history, by fear, by our past, by a whole set of different things. And so we know people are not predictable, and we don't experience change in the same ways. The fourth one was that all of these kind of referred to done or a future state. And in today's reality, change has no end state. I'm not sure it really ever did, but in today's reality, it definitely doesn't. And then the fifth one is one size fits most, right? These assume what I call a context free application, which, as we know, as good practitioners, that is never the case. Every organization is different, every team is different, every function's different, every role's different, every person's different. And so, this the models, which they're models, they have to assume things, and they assume kind of context free application. So these were my five assumptions that broke everything down around the models. The next slide is an important one. And this kind of came to me in a moment, actually, when I was talking with a leadership team. And I just kind of blurted it out that, they were debating change. And so, I said, change is more like weather than it is the way you guys are thinking about it. They were, let's plan, let's budget, let's build. And when it's done, it's done. And in reality, change is dynamic, it's emergent, it's complex. For 25 years, um, I spent all of my time treating change like I was trying to project manage weather, which is impossible, right? We can forecast it, we can't control it. It is a dynamic thing that requires us just to navigate it. And so, our plans, not to say plans aren't important, but living, breathing, and dying on plans, budgets, building it, and treating it when it's done, it's done. Has not worked and is not working. So these were and you'll see in the book, these are two of many diagnoses, but I think the two big ones here, on what I came out of this with, that kind of set the place for, okay, if these things are true, and I believe them to be, again, this is one man's opinion of this, but if these things are true, what's the solution to it? And so, um, if if playbooks don't work, I think the answer starts with a shift in thinking, and it's a really important shift in thinking. And so I think it starts with shifting the verbs that we have tied around this practice from management to design. And so we have lived in this world of change management for really 35 years formally in business, right? And it's always about how do we control a process. It's always about our plan. It's the big O word, planning for outcomes, and everything coming from the center, and then projects with end dates. We've kind of managed it in that way. And at the core of the book, a lot of the tools you will see in the book are really intended to shift that verb from management to design. And so
Sorry.
instead of how do
Oh,
we
sorry.
control the oh, go ahead, Nisi.
Oh, sorry. Are you able to shift back? Because you've had two questions around the diagnosis. So I think it was 5 or 6 points that you had, and I think because we're going into a shift, it makes sense to address those questions before we come into that. Is that okay?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for managing the chat there. I'm not looking at it.
No worries. So Kat has asked, "Hey Brad, can you describe a bit more what you mean by pushing things to the edges? What does that mean in practice?"
Yeah. So great question, Kat. Thanks for slowing me down here, which I needed to. This is a critical context and foundational building block of the book, which is what I'm saying when I'm saying control coming from the center, and instead of that, we're pushing it to the edges. Is typically when we do change initiatives, everything starts at the center, right? We build a business case. The leaders are the ones informing the business case. They very rarely go to the edge where the intelligence lives, right? Where people are actually dealing with customers, and so they know the impacts of these things on customers. Where they're doing they are the end to end process. So they're typically the start to finish process. where they're actually going to have to do things different, right? They're going to hit buttons on the keyboard that are different. Their screens will look different. The UI will be totally different. Whatever happens, we are bringing the edge into the center. And so think of this like practically what it looks like is the first tool you'll see, and I don't have time today to go through the tools, but the first tool you'll see in our tool set is ecosystem mapping. And at the heart of ecosystem mapping is identifying what are the edges, and then having the edges then come in and identify, okay, if we do A, B, and C change, what's the DEF impact to you? Not our version as leaders. And the reason I shared the story of, me as a CEO of a healthcare organization, I lived this, right? We would do things that impacted our nurses that ultimately impacted our patients. We didn't deal with patients, and largely didn't deal with the nurses. Yes, we knew enough about them to be dangerous, but we didn't know the day to day and why they did, the three things they did to get to that place. But we were the ones informing what the next would look like. And so this idea is really saying, how do we bring that intelligence into the center and inform everything we do from that starting point, not the starting point of, yes, you need a business case. Yes, leaders need to make decisions, but that can't be the starting point for it. They have to have the intelligence to do it. And often these things are informed by, lukewarm intelligence, or roundabout intelligence, and we need the actual intelligence that says, hey, here's the way we do it and here's why we do it that way. We've all been in projects, we get down to implementation, and people don't do it, and they don't do it for good reason. It's not resistance, it doesn't work. They do it that way for a very good reason, sound rationale. And in my world, my former world in healthcare, most of the time it had direct impacts on patients. And when you're dealing in that world, it's life or death things. And so we needed that intelligence to inform our decisions. Hope I answered your question, Kat.
Thank you. And it echoes. So Rebecca also put a chat comment to say, potentially it's working closely with the people who are impacted by the change. And by the sounds of it, that's exactly what you're saying. How do we bring the people who are actually impacted by the change to make decisions where it matters, as opposed to the people who are so far removed, owning all the decisions and not probably also not really understanding the impacts? Nobody, it's rare for you to go to organizations and find people who are just malicious and just trying to make things difficult for people. That's rare. It's usually they don't have enough insight, or they can't see the issue in as much of a holistic way as somebody who's operationally closer to these issues day to day. So yeah, thank you so much for that. There's another comment from Lulu. Hey Brad, I completely agree with your perspective, as many of the traditional models were built on the assumptions of predictability, linearity, and control. What does this mean for the change industry and professionals itself?
Mm. It means unlearning what we've learned. And I find myself guilty. I'm writing. I wrote the book, and I find myself still saying things that um, are counter to things that are in the book, right? Because I'm still in the process. It's 25 years of knowledge. Um, I think the really good side of AI is that it's the forcing function that will force us to do things different. You know, we live in a world where, we do quarterly planning still, and, things change on a quarterly basis based on how we're doing and our signals in our quarterly plans. AI is not going to allow us to do that, right? Every day we're getting new things, new features, new technologies that are changing the way we do things overnight, and it's forcing us to become adaptable. It's forcing us into what I say is the answer to all of this. If I had a big picture answer, it is, instead of managing change, we're building organizations that are truly adaptable. and AI is a little bit of the forcing function because every day as humans, if you're using AI every day as humans, there's something being released that is forcing you to take what you did yesterday and do it completely different tomorrow. And so it's building this capability in us. And I think for us practitioners, I wrote this book for the practitioner community. And I wrote it, Nissi and I talked about this when we first started talking about doing this, but I wrote this book to create dialogue because I think it starts there as a community of practitioners. We need to come together and say, okay, this has not worked, right? The numbers have not meaningfully changed in 20, 25, 30 years. The same statistics have lived, and arguably they've probably gotten worse, maybe a little bit worse. So if it were working, it would work. It's not working, and it's definitely not going to work in the world that we're living in today, and definitely not the one we're going to live in tomorrow.
Thank you. Just one more question, then we'll get back to the slides. So Ket has asked a follow-up. Thanks, Brad. That makes sense. If I may ask the follow-up, do you think or have you heard of co-design, which has been a relatively new idea here in the UK?
I think I have heard of it. I haven't heard of it in that way. Kat, I'll talk to you about what I think is something similar in my work. So at the center of our tool set sits human-centered design, which is which is essentially co-design, right? It is how do we bring everybody into the design process? How do we bring the humans into the design process? And we're shifting everything away from managing to that was the last slide I walked through, managing to designing. And so we're shifting the entire mindset of the practice to everything we do, incentives and comp, all the levers we pull that we have pulled become design problems, not change problems, not management problems. And so this edge in kind of mindset drives the desire and need to co-collaborate, co-design, and to use the tools, the great tools that we have in the human-centered design practice to really inform how do we impact humans in a human way. And so I may be butchering that. I would love to chat afterwards and exchange some messages on what you guys are doing in the UK around co-design. So if I'm totally off base there, just DM me and I'd love to talk about it.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, co-design, it's an interesting one. I think in theory, it's been around for a while, usually in design spaces. So I did a design thinking course about 8 years ago, and center to that was a principle around co-design, and you're experimenting, you're hypothesizing with people impacted by the change. I did that course about 7 years ago. I've never worked in an organization since that has actually meaningfully engaged in that way. So I think, and maybe Ket, you might want to drop a comment. I think there's a lot of talk about co-design in spaces, but usually design spaces, and I'm not seeing it filter to change the way change is managed in the way that I would hope.
Mm,
There's also some nuance here. So I think with tech projects, you see it a bit more, agile tech projects to be more precise. But if you're doing, and it depends on the type of tech as well. ERP transformations, I've never seen co-design being used. Rolling out a CRM, I have seen co-design being used. So there's so many ways to look at
mhm.
it. Maybe watch this space. It might be a topic for another LinkedIn Live. But I'll hand
Yeah,
back over to you, Brad.
sounds like a great topic. Yeah, I think the maybe I want to hit on a macro point here, Nisi, and somebody brought this up when I was doing an event for UC Irvine, and it's a great point. Um, a lot of a lot of what I'm saying here requires the organization to do things fundamentally different, which is a really tough. The question is how do you sell this to organizations, which is a really tough. It is a really tough sell, and I'm not going to pretend that it's not because it is. It is tough to talk to organizations to get them to start thinking about, okay, we have this. massive ERP rollout, and you want to do things different than the way we have done them. I mean, every ERP rollout has done for the last 40 years. Like that's insane. So this is a thing where it it it, it requires some the right conditions, and requires people to, especially leaders, to be in a place where they have probably been through a failed transformation or two. Typically, where we're seeing traction here is, hey, this is our third stab at transformation. So the organization I start the book with, that I started this presentation with, they were on V3 of their business transformation. And so they knew they had to do it different because what they were doing was not working. So it requires the right conditions to do it, and not everybody has those conditions and is ready to take that on. So okay, I would be remiss if I didn't put at least one slide in here about leadership. And so another core central point of the reframe here is, the measure of leadership is not how many good decisions did I make. It's not, did I put my cape on and come in as Superman today or Superwoman today. It is how many good decisions got made without needing me. So this is moving and shifting, the leader as hero to leader as gardener. And I've said the word, and you'll see the word show up, probably 100 times. Um, but conditions, right? As a leader, you're a condition setter, you're a context architect. It's not you putting on the cape, and you doing everything and everything running through you. The measure of good leadership in this, and I think in the future, is how many good decisions got made without needing me. So it is a shift. It is a mindset shift for our leaders. Especially those that have forged, really successful careers, being the central linchpin of all things decisions in the organization. And so I would be remiss if I didn't include one slide on leadership. And I think this is the slide that is most important, and it is the shift from leader as hero to leader as gardener. All right, I adopted this practice 10 years ago in my class. So if you remember three things, here's what I want you to remember. Change can't be managed. Only conditions for adaptation can be designed. Organizations are living systems. This is not new. This goes back 100 years plus. They are not machines to reprogram. And our goal is not better change management. This is not to build the next new ProSci version. It's not to build the goal is not better change management. It's building an organization that doesn't need change to be managed. If you said ultimately what does success look like for change without management, it is that we build a organization. I'm an org development person by background and trade. It's building an organization that just doesn't need change to be managed. So that is the three things I would love to leave you all with, and we have 5 minutes, happy to take questions. And Nissi, I'll kick it back to you.
Thank you. That's amazing. And I feel like even with those 3 points, there's so much that I can pick up on. And it's funny that you've uh, mentioned your background in org development, because I think fundamentally, with I don't know if it's overlooking it or we take it for granted that organizations are systems, but it's one of those things. It's like, there's that story, the emperor with no clothes,
Hmm.
and he goes out and nobody wants to. We all know organizations are systems, but in everything that we do, we treat them like machines. We want that certainty. We want to know that if we take these 5 steps, these are definitely going to be the outcomes, and we don't need to plan for any other eventualities, even though we all know that's not the way organizations work. So I actually really love the way that you're bringing us back to basics and reminding us, like, look, the emperor has no clothes. We're all working in a way that makes no sense. Come back to, sense here. And you've got that point about sense making. And I could go on and on and on. There's so much I love about that, but we have some comments. So I'm going to shut up. We've got here a comment from Miguel. That's a fair observation, Lizzie. Co-design becomes more prevalent when you get to work more closely with product teams. This can happen in two ways: when they pull you in from the get go, or when they need to tackle an adoption problem. Absolutely. I've seen those. I don't know if you've got a comment to make on that as well, Brad.
Yeah. Ironically, uh, one of the very first organizations I got to do at least parts of this with was with their product team, and they were built for this, right? The conditions were right for this because this is the way they design. This is their product management process was kind of centered around this, and so it was the ripe conditions for it. It also was the toughest group to get to make the changes, so that was an interesting because they were fine going and walking through the process. They were not fine um, with what the outcomes of the what spit out of that process were, and so they were very hard to make the change. But they were a great test case because they were used to designing in this way, and this is the natural heartbeat and rhythm of the way they did things. So yeah, it's. I'm going to read up on co-design. I think it's probably very similar to my frame, but I'm going to thank you for this because it's not a term I was really familiar with.
Mm. We've got another comment from Lulu. My view is that co-design is both valuable and limited. It is unquestionably better than purely top-down design because it moves intelligence closer to where reality is experienced. It surfaces context, friction, unintended consequences, and human dynamics that leadership teams often cannot see. But I also think there's a risk that co-design still holds onto a hidden assumption that if we involve enough people early enough, we can collectively design, in inverted commas, a stable future state.
Mm, Lulu, that sounds like an article to me there, um, and very interesting perspective. And I think you're absolutely spot on and on to something there. Um, I have I have seen these unintended consequences as part of our process a lot of times, and then you're working your way backwards again. And so, I think you're right. I would love to. I will sign up to. I will like, comment, and subscribe to your next article on LinkedIn around that. So you've got uh, you've got my personal guarantee of that. So that's a good one.
Absolutely. So we're quickly running out of time. There's some other comments on there, Brad, after the session, if you could have a look. We have also been asked, could they see the 3 points at the end again, please? And as you put up that slide, if you could maybe close off by how can people contact you? How can they get the book? How can they work with you? What does that look like? That would be amazing. I'll give you time to put up that slide first, though.
Yep. So it should be up here. It's probably on a delay, but you should see it here in a second. Um, yeah, best way to contact me. I think a lot of you, I'm recognizing a lot of familiar names in here. So a lot of you are connected with me on LinkedIn. If you're not, let's connect there and just shoot me a DM. You can find us. So the company that our we have a boutique management consulting firm. It's called navigatecorp.com. You can find us there. You can see more stuff. We have a really great section of articles there that if you're into long form content and want to nerd out around the topic, there's a great section there to learn more and deeper about how we think about this. So that's probably the best two places to find. But as if you know me, I'm heavy on LinkedIn, and that's probably the best way to reach out to me. So I know we can exchange emails and phone numbers or whatever. So probably the best spot is there.
And where can we get the book?
The book is only on Amazon.com now, and we will have the Kindle version. It's not available yet. We had some technical issues, but the Kindle version will be out here probably by the middle of June. So middle of June, Kindle, hardback, paperbacks available now, though.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Brad. And thank you for joining us for this LinkedIn Live, your first LinkedIn Live for how business change really happens. Thank you all for joining. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nissi Ozigbu. You can find me here on LinkedIn, and that links out to everything else that I do, whether it's change leadership, training, and consulting. So I would love to speak to more of you. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day, your whole day, if you're in the same area of the world as Brad, and the next half of your day for the same area of the world as me. Take care.